O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
As God connects with the world, right? The thing that made the world exist is God fully, right? Isn't some lower form of divinity, you know, some intermediary being or whatever. So that's like for us on our side, it's very hopeful. But then from the side of creation, it also means that at the center of all things, right, hidden behind all the multiplicity is this logos. And so, you know, we formulate it differently. St. Maximus formulates it in different ways. He'll say things like behind every phenomenon, everything you can recognize as having being, there is there's a logo. So the logi be hidden behind.
Right.
And so that everything has its purpose that's hidden behind it. Everything has something which is leading it up towards God. And that ultimately that the logi are the logos. And that's what is even crazier for people. It's like actually Christ, you know, the divine logos is hidden behind all things that have being. And so in the proper state, you know, in a state of, if we are able to purify our passions, if we're able to, you know, enter into communion with God, then we can actually perceive this in the world.
Right.
We see the world like shining and bright with the presence of God, and that God is actually hiding behind all of creation. So it's a very beautiful and powerful vision of reality, which avoids the pantheistic error of thinking that all things are gods and all things are God or whatever, but
Right.
really this notion that all things are kind of are behind all things. God is hiding, like the source of everything, and that if we see it, if we approach it properly, then we can encounter him in anyone and in everything.
I think you hit on it with that, the particulars and the unity. So when you know, looking through the history of world religions and philosophy, the dialectic between the one and the many, which one's more real, the multiplicity or the unifying categories themselves, the essence of these things? And Christianity is the only one that makes a claim that the Godhead is both one and many. It's one essence in three persons. And this is
the three aren't like a lower ontological category, because you have like in Vedantism, you have this idea that there's three hypostases or whatever you could use of God, but they're always lower, right?
Yes.
It's always like a lower thing, whereas we're like, no, it's not lower, and it breaks your mind and it breaks your thinking. But you know, it's like, yeah.
Right. And it's that personhood theology, because in Vedanta theology, the avatars are dissensions of this Brahmanic force. So it's always, like you're saying, a lesser. And we can see this in the Western context in something probably similar to like Neoplatonism, where the logos is the first demiurge, the first creation, the first lesser form. But in Orthodoxy, we're saying, no, that's not the case. God proceeded from himself, and by definition, if the essence of God proceeds from himself, it's still God. And if God begets himself, by definition, it's still God. And so that's what the logos is. And this collapsing of these dialectics and seeing that Christianity is the only one that maintains both one and the many, and saying it's both and. That's the beauty of Orthodoxy, that, you know, the debates within the Western mind is always like one or the other, and Orthodoxy like, no, it's both and. And
and that's so true about Orthodoxy in general. It's like, it's always yes and. You know, you get into conversation with people, and it's like, it's the Bible, and it's like, yeah, you're right, but not the Bible and not that. It's like the Bible and liturgy, the Bible and all. It's like it's a more it's a different way of thinking.
Right, it's a different way of thinking, and it's that Eastern, you know, in the West, especially, you can look at the 60s counterculture, this fascination with Eastern mysticism, be it in the context of Zen Buddhism or Hinduism or Taoism. But Orthodoxy, again, it's that royal path that's right in the middle, both geographically but also literally, that it's not the Western you know, rational propositional focus, but it's also not totally mystical, where it's devoid of personhood, which is what we're getting. Because personhood, again, tied to this logos theology, one of the most important things is our Ordo Theologiae as Orthodox is beginning with being made in the image of God. There's three persons in one essence, and having personhood and being able to participate in these uncreated energies of God. This is what distinguishes us from the animals, but this also is a way in which distinguishes us from all the other religions. You know, Bishop Maximus, and I know your friend John Vervaeke have been talking about Neoplatonism and orthodoxy, and Bishop Maximus has been trying to hit through the 3 or 4 conversations, is that orthodoxy is a participatory theology. This is very different than a propositionally based theology. It's not in the head. It's in your heart. It's something that you actually live.
Yeah, I mean, we have that quote from Evagrios it's in the Philokalia, I think, that says, you know, the true theologian is he who prays. That's what theology is, right? It's talking to God. It's not so much talking about God. So it's definitely it is. I think that it takes a long time for people to get that, even in the Orthodox Church, even like a lot of the catechumen, like they come in and I get it, right? They're just like, what's the categories? How do we, you know, what are the definitions? I want to get it right. And you're right that it's part of it, but most of it is, all right, like, why don't you come to church and light a candle? Like, come to church, light a candle, kiss the icon, you know, it's like, smell the incense, you have to kind of enter into it.
Exactly. So I was wondering if maybe we can get into these logi. Again, like you talked about, the first video I saw of yours was really profound, and you were talking about is basically, I think the title was Santa Claus is Real, and I was like, what is he talking about? So I clicked on it, and you're talking about the reality in which we move through the symbolic world. Again, the whole basis for what you're doing over on your channel and with your work. What did you mean, for those who hadn't seen that video? That was one of your earlier videos. What do you mean Santa Claus is real? I thought it was this conception. I thought it was a Coca-Cola product.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it was really just to help people break through their materialist way of thinking. You know, people think that things that exist only exist like in something that can be contained and perceived and held in the hand, which is ridiculous, but it's a habit that we have. And we enter into it, and especially when people, you know, the debunkers and these types of people that try to mock religious phenomena, they tend to fall back on this very, very annoying kind of reductionism and materialism. But the truth is that's not how it works, you know. And so in the video, I was mostly trying to say that Santa Claus exists. Like, you just go to the mall at Christmas, there he is, and you say, well, that's not Santa Claus. Well, it's the body of Santa Claus, because you recognize it, right? And you know what he looks like, you know how he acts. And if Santa Claus at the mall starts acting like a drunk guy, then you're going to be very disturbed by that and bothered. And so it's just to help people understand that the idea that beings are just these limited things that you can hold in your hand is ridiculous. And that there are all types of levels of agency and all types of levels of being that you can experience. And the Santa Claus one was mostly as a kind of humorous way to help you understand, for example, how you can exist in a city, and how when you encounter a judge in a city, you know, that judge is not just Joe the judge. He participates in the body of an agency that acts on you, that can put you in jail, that can tax you, that can do all these things. And so you could say something like, a city doesn't exist because I can't hold it, I can't do it. But, you know, when the cop puts the handcuffs on you and puts you in jail, you have to realize that there are levels of agency that are beyond the individual, and just have to accept that. And and thinking that way is now helping a lot of secular people, like you mentioned, John Vervaeke and other secular types, understand what angels are and understand what demons are, because they think that angels are just invisible people with wings. And it's like, yeah, we represent them that way, but the vast, you know, agencies and intelligences that have principality over large swaths of human existence, you know, it's more than just a bunch of invisible people with angels. It has more to do with understanding transpersonal agency and how it affects us and how we participate in these subtle bodies that these beings have.
Right. And your explanation of the Santa Claus, again, gets back at what we just highlighted with the one in the mini, and that you're highlighting that it has to be real because the category itself, the universal category of Santa Claus, it's being substantiated by every mall Santa Claus that you see. It's the one in the mini coming, it's both and. You see, it's an orthodox way to approach these things that is just so foreign to the Western mind, because they presuppose the universal, but yet at the same time, they don't rationally understand how that is the case, and they just perceive the immanent, the multiplicity.
And it's really important for people, especially now, to understand that, because you know, if you don't believe in these transpersonal agencies, then you always have to rely on massive conspiracies. Like, there's no other way, right? Because if Santa Claus doesn't exist, doesn't have some form of existence and agency over you, that means that there's this massive conspiracy of parents all over the world that all collude together to lie to their children about this guy that comes in their house at midnight. And he's like, can you imagine a crazy conspiracy like that? Like, the entire world governments are involved, and like every single in all of the West, you have this secret society of people who teach their children about Santa Claus. It's crazy. But so you don't need that. You just need to understand spiritual agency to realize that when you notice patterns and behaviors in the world that actually coalesce, you don't necessarily always need a human chain of causality for it to happen. You just need to understand how transpersonal agency works. And it can help us to not go into crazy paranoid fantasies when we notice patterns, because then we start to imagine all these like weird secret conspiracies. Like, you actually don't need them for it to be real. It's worse because sometimes it's just demons, it's worse because it's like, but it's less, it'll make you less paranoid to say, it's just a demon that's manifesting itself in the world. You don't need all human agents all across for it to be real.
Right. And it ties back to then how archetypes work. And that's where I want to move next, is the archetypes and these logi, and how that relates back to this larger concept of logos, which is who Jesus Christ is. For those who are new or haven't caught on, the logos is Jesus Christ. The logos is what incarnated into space and time. And so you're talking about Santa Claus and these archetypes and the reality of the archetypal realm, if you will. And for so many of the Western mind, they hear archetypes, they think of Jung, and then they think of the unconscious. Well, within their own Darwinian framework, the world itself is constantly changing, and the unconscious is formed by our own personal experience with the world. Therefore, the unconscious and these archetypes of the father and the mother and the hero, they should also then be changing, because by definition, it's all based on a sort of a fluid framework, because they don't have a metaphysical point to root it in, which is what Logos theology is doing. It's saying, no, guys, you can have your archetypes. Plato was talking about this well before Christianity, but you have to have a metaphysic in which these concepts and these ideas are rooted in, so they are unchanging through space and time. Because yes, Heraclitus is right. You don't step into the same river twice, but that doesn't mean that everything is fluid and unchanging.
I mean, I agree that I usually don't even use the word archetype in my videos, because of the Jungian problem, where people tend to understand it's a perfectly legitimate word, by the way. St. Gregory of Nyssa uses it, in his writings. And so it's just that people tend to associate it with this idea that it's somehow psychic structures, where these archetypes are psychic structures, but that's not what we're proposing. We're proposing that they are universal structures, and that reality actually unfolds based on these structures. And it's not like, you don't have to understand it as like a kind of magical thing, but the world has to be patterned, and it's not just a psychic thing. In order for anything to exist in the world, there has to be order in the particularities, and that's it. That's all it is. It's just that the order of that binds particularity to one. That's an archetype. And so you can understand it very low in terms of, how molecules bound together to form higher forms of qualities. But then you can also do it from a human perspective. That is, for me to be able to recognize certain categories across space and time, they have to be bound by a pattern. And like, let's say the pattern of fatherhood, it's just a real pattern. It doesn't mean that it's in its instantiation. There can be variability, and there can be variability across it, but ultimately it leads to one, especially as you get higher and higher and you move towards the divine logos himself. And so in some ways you could say that all the logi and all the patterns, they are not absolute. They're not infinite. They are limited, and they are, you know, they have a kind of a relativity to them, but that relativity is always pointing up and up and up and up. And as you follow that line, then you reach the divine logos. I mean, not with your thinking, but even in experience, you start to see through the glimmers of these patterns that there's something holding them together, you know, at the summit of it.
Can you explain for people then what we're calling archetypes, how in an Orthodox worldview, they are called the logi, as St. Maximus talks about the divine principles of creation. And like you're saying, these are the divine principles that sets the pattern for reality. Can you explain a little bit about what these logi are and how they relate to that?
I mean, that's the way that I see them is that they're the reason, like they're the reason why you perceive something in the first place. Like they're the reason why multiplicity is binding into one. Why is it that when I look at the world around me or experience the world around me, I don't just experience infinite chaos and infinite multiplicity? It's like, no, I experience different levels. And there's a lot of patterns, like there's a lot of levels, and there's almost indefinite levels and play of patterns. But I always am able to see the one through the many. And that line, right? That line is that line that kind of drives you up towards the divine logos. And it's not right. It's not a rational. It's not an exercise in thought. It's an exercise in experience. And that's why we tend to say that, you know, we talk about the nous as this capacity to kind of grasp things, right? To grasp their unity without the dialectic, without the thought process. And so in some ways, perceiving the divine logos is closer to almost physical experience in the sense that it's just intuitive. It's like this intuitive grasping of the one. And most people aren't even aware of it. They're not conscious of it. You know, we experience the nous all the time. The nous is actually what drives the way that you function in reality. But because we're so clouded by our passions and our thought that we don't tend to see it. But we do have that capacity to just grasp the one. That's what leads you into the logi.